Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. By George, I tell you, this is going to be quite a show. I tell you, I want to bring a little history back here for you. I mean, right in the midst of the election, I mean, all kinds of things are happening at this point in time here within the state of Oregon. We got the governor's race. We've got all kinds of races here locally. We got a swamp now. We got a swamp here in the state of Oregon, here in the Portland metropolitan area aspect of it. You know, and all of a sudden I'm running for chair of Multnomah County, and wow, I mean, this is exciting. And so I went back in history and looked down the list of those 33 people running for governor of the state of Oregon. And boy, I tell you, if you're talking about someone that's professional background wise aspect of it, being in politics as long as I have, if not longer than I have had, is a gentleman by the name of, guess who? Bill Sizemore. Remember him? Bill Sizemore. Bill is running for governor of the state of Oregon. That's historical, folks. And we have the pleasure of having him on here. And right up front with this is not in a negative way or this, that, and the other. The fact of the matter is, he's part of that history. He's part of Oregon aspect of it. He's been around for quite some time. And he's here. Patriot, I mean, he's an Oregonian from A to Z aspect of it. But the kinds of things that you're going to be hearing within this hour, we're going to spend an hour with Bill and take the opportunity to basically go back in time and how he got involved in politics and the things that he was doing in politics and this, that, and the other. And you know, right up front with it, this when you get in politics, you know, it's a very active kind of an environment. And you know, in all due respect, he'll cut you up right up front before you do anything for that matter. He'll spit you out and give you the opportunity to come back. But not too many people can come back, but he did. And I'm saying this to you right off the bat to let you know that what you're going to be looking for, and you want to just stay glued to this tube because we're going to have quite a roller race or whatever you might call it. I'm sort of excited. I'm kind of a little short for words right now. Okay, but anyway, Bill, how you doing?
You're short for words.
I'm short, buddy. I'm short.
That's a rare thing.
Now you know. You know where I got it from.
You put that on the calendar right there. There was a day when Bruce was short for words. I was there myself.
Oh boy. And we go back a ways. We'll talk a little bit about that. First, I want to have him give us an introduction of you just let him just talk. Let him talk. I want to have him give it up right up front with you because he's a major family man. You know, right up front with you. He's moved a couple of times or whatever, and then talk a little bit about himself and talk a little bit about where he's at, and then we're going to get into politics. I want to make sure he spends some time on that and how they basically threw him out of politics for a bit. They didn't throw him. He threw him. Basically, just opted to say give them some space. But he's back, and he's running for governor of the state of Oregon. Welcome, Governor.
I plan on winning.
All right, there you go.
I do. I plan on winning. It's going to be a shocker because there's like 19 or 20 Republicans running right now.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm going to. I expect to win the primary, and I expect for Oregon to elect a Republican. For the first time in 40 years.
Okay.
In fact, on my website, friendsofbillsizemore.com, right up front, there's a picture of me standing in the governor's office in 1980 with Vic Atiyeh.
Really?
The last Republican governor.
Wow, yes. Wow.
So, and that's, 42 years ago. And it's he had just appointed me to a governor's task force on workers' compensation reform, and so I had my picture taken with him there in the office. But I'll just tell you, by way of background, I talked last night at a debate or candidate forum with the group called Timber Unity.
Timber Unity.
They're the more powerful conservative force in Oregon right now, and really up and coming, and doing a really good job. They focus on natural resources, ranchers, farmers, timber people, logging, etc. And I told them I was born and raised in the Olympic Peninsula, in the rainforest, a little town called Montesano, Washington, logging town, and I moved to Portland in '72. I'll get to that in a minute, but when I moved to Portland, I fell in love with the dry climate.
A dry climate.
The dry climate, because where I was raised,
Yeah.
you know, I went to school up on the Quinault Indian Reservation up in there as well, and we measured rain not in inches but feet. You know, how much rain did you get? Well, we got 12 feet this year. That's where all the vampires go in those books because there's no sunshine up there. So anyway, I my first job was bucking hay on a farm, and then milking 57 dairy cows every day, and then I did the things that are associated with the timber industry, and I've set lots of chokers in the woods, and I've pulled wood on the green chain, ran forklift in a farmer's co-op, and just kind of did things that, in fact, I packed shakes in a cedar shake mill where they put shakes on your roof, you know.
Right.
I packed the shakes and worked in the plywood mills. And then in 1972, I felt directed towards Portland Bible College. And I went there, I graduated from there, and actually taught for a couple of years there. And I just fell in love with Portland. And that's, if you look back 72, that's 50 years ago this summer. I will have been, I think I'm officially an Oregonian after 50 years.
50.
Yeah. And it seemed kind of a jump from theology to politics. But I came to the conclusion that, you know, doing what you feel your, if you will, your life's ministry is, for some people that go to Bible college, that's to go be a missionary or evangelist or a pastor of a church or whatever, teach Bible college. For me, it was getting involved in other areas of society that affect the lives of everyday people. I mean, as Christians, we're supposed to pray for that we can live in peace,
Right.
tranquility. And sometimes the government helps with that, and sometimes the government impedes that. And when government breaks down and it fails to do what it's supposed to do, it takes too much money from the people and wastes it. And that's money they don't have to raise their families, feed their kids, you know, all the things they want to do. And other times the government fails to maintain safety. The example, the Antifa riots, where they were burning and pillaging and looting and then left unchecked. To me, that was a total failure on the part of the left-wing Democrat leadership in the city of Portland to do what they're required to do. Step in and say, listen, peaceful protests, totally on board. But when you start throwing rocks and Molotov cocktails at police officers and burning all the cars in a car lot down and burning buildings, you are a criminal. And you must be arrested, you must be prosecuted, and the word must go out that while we celebrate our right to free speech and to protest, rioting is not an American thing, and it is an infringement of the rights of all the people whose property you damaged. They didn't do anything to you, but you're just out expressing your anger in a way that's not acceptable. And so government breaks down that way, and you get a homeless crisis where you have people just go back, Bruce, 10, 15 years ago, and imagine somebody walking down the sidewalk in downtown Portland, out on Powell Boulevard, and whatever they are, and just stopping, setting up a tent, and say, I'm going to live here.
No, it wouldn't happen.
I'm gonna trash all the way around. It's gonna be trash piled up. If I use my needles and throw them out on the, I'm gonna just do that. And you imagine 20 years ago, the idea of that would have been so intolerable that people wouldn't have tried it because they would have been arrested.
Yeah.
And now the failure to make people respect law and order, the rule of law, has led to communities not being safe, people afraid to walk down their sidewalks, let their kids walk down the sidewalks. And, you know, when people are living homeless like that, they're not just living homeless, they are also looting, sometimes small crimes, sometimes not so small. And people's homes get broken into. They got to lock everything, nail it down. And when I decided to run for governor, it was because I felt that Portland, especially, but the state as a whole, was spiraling downward at a pace that we were going to look like Baltimore or Detroit, and inexcusable. And it's to me, you know, I have lots of friends who are Democrats, and they don't like what they're seeing. And I think the Democrat leadership in this area has proven that they're not capable of governing. And I'm sad to say that because, I got involved in politics back in 1980 with Governor, or sorry, Mayor Frank Ivancy.
Right? Oh, Frank. Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, I was with Frank the night he lost to Bud Clark. And it was like we were in a hotel room because they were going to have a big celebration. And then it looked like Bud was going to force him to a runoff. Mm-hmm. So only had about a dozen of us in a hotel room to watch the returns because knowing he was going to have to face Bud Clark again in the fall. And then Bud won in the primary. It was just like shell shock in the room. And Frank was going to be out of a job, and all the people in the room were going to be out of a job. I was just a volunteer working on the campaign, but it's, to me, since then, the city has gradually and then faster and faster begun to circle the drain, and I hate it. I want to stop it, and as governor, I will do whatever it's necessary to turn the state around.
Well, that's why I have you here.
Thank you.
I'm just being straight up here. That's why I have you here because you're right, and then I was going to add to your listing of some objections that many of us opposed to was the whole issue of exposing themselves and urinating right in the public, pooping.
Oh yeah,
all over the place.
Right in the doorways of stores.
Oh my God! And these are human beings.
Yeah, no, I mean it's tragic.
They've lost it.
It's tragic, yeah. But I'll tell you, I am a compassionate guy. Mm-hmm. In fact, I come to tears easily on things where people are hurting. Yeah. Sometimes I have to turn my head so people don't see that, because I choke up over things. But I also believe in tough love. Mm-hmm. And the people on the streets, a lot of people don't believe this, but a lot of people on the streets are there by choice. Mm-hmm. They're not just a lot of them are not just victims that they lost their home and they're doing their best. A lot of them want that lifestyle. They want no responsibility. They want no taxes, no job, no schedule. And there's maybe some place where they can go and do that, but it's not on our sidewalks and our off-ramps along the freeway and trashing and making a mockery of the government and our community. And so I believe in tough love. If you're on the streets and you want help out of drugs, we'll get you help. Mm-hmm. If you have mental issues, we'll get you help. Mm-hmm. If you're just a lazy bum who wants to beg or steal, then we'll either get you a bus ticket out of town, out of the state, or if necessary, you'll be locked up when you commit crimes. Mm-hmm. We won't just, but whatever you do, whatever choice you make, the choice you will not have is to stay where you are. Mm-hmm. We won't allow, as governor, I will not allow people to just go set up camp along the streets and on the highways and just trash the area. I will not allow it.
Mm-hmm. So how would you go about doing that, you think? If I was to ask you.
Well, it's not a simple question, but right. Let me just show you what the mayor and others have been doing. They've been saying, okay, we're going to clean up, force people out. And if you ask them, and some people in the media responsibly have asked them, so what will you do if you move them out of that area you don't want them to camp in, off of Powell Boulevard, for example, a very bad area out there? What will you do if they come back? And it's just a blank stare. We haven't got that far. Mm-hmm. We don't know, and they do. They just come right back because they don't respect the law. Like I said, go back 20 years ago, people wouldn't have thought of that. Now you tell them to move, and say, all right, we'll move. And then when you go away, we'll be back tomorrow. And we can't tolerate it. It's a breakdown of law and order. And I do blame the left wing of the Democrat Party, not the good, hard-working, blue-collar Democrats who, a lot of them voted for Ronald Reagan, for example. Not those folks, but the far left-wing radicals have taken over that party. And that's why I honestly believe that this fall, when we elect a governor in the state, I think there's a very good chance that the Democrat candidate will come in third. I think a Republican's going to win.
Betsy. Yeah, you got Betsy.
Yeah, but Republican's going to win. Betsy Johnson is going to a Democrat,
right.
And she votes like a Democrat, except she's pro-timber family, and she's pro-Second Amendment, guns. Other than that, she's a Democrat, and she voted for the big tax increases and that sort of thing. But there's a lot of people in Portland and Eugene that will never, if their life depended on it, they just couldn't make themselves vote for a Republican. And what Betsy Johnson does as an unaffiliated, a Democrat who resigned from the Democrat Party and gave up her Senate seat in the Oregon legislature, announced as an unaffiliated, has raised so far $5 million. It doesn't even have a primary. She gives them she gives those people that are, for good reason, dissatisfied with what the Democrats have done, gives them someplace else to go because they're not going to vote for Republican. And so I think she's going to draw about 2-to-1 Democrat support over Republican support, and the Tina Kotek or whomever the Democrats nominate in their primary is going to end up coming in third place. I think it'd be a great day for the state. One party rule does not work, Bruce.
Right.
It does not work. They become arrogant.
Yep.
They overreach. They lose respect for the people. They don't respect your tax dollars. You know what? One president said one time, paraphrase, that I think it might have been Calvin Coolidge. But when it's in your paycheck or in your bank account, it's real money. But when you give it to the government, it doesn't really belong to anybody anymore. It's like this big pile of trash in the middle of the floor they got to get rid of. And honestly, I've been around enough to know that the respect that politicians have for the money that is extracted from hardworking people's paychecks, they don't have the respect that they ought to have, and they spend it. I mean, I've done jobs as a contractor, and to my shame, I say this. It's been a long time ago. But I've done jobs where they would call me up and say, "Hey, Bill, would you bid on this government job?" And I'd say, "Yeah, sure." And I'd go look at it, and man, it doesn't even really need to be painted or whatever the job is, sandblasted. It doesn't even really need it. But they say, "But we need to get this done. So would you bid on it?" And I say, I don't really want to do this job. So I would bid 4 times what I would normally bid. 4 times.
And they give it to you.
That's to make sure I didn't get it.
Right.
And then I'd get the job. And I'd ask the guy, the official, I'd say, I haven't done a lot of work for the government before. How close was I on this bid? And they say, there's no joke. It's the honest truth. They'd say, well, I'm not really supposed to tell you that, but since you're new working with us, I just tell you, you were way less than everybody else. And that's tragic. And so I asked, so what's going on? And they said, well, end of the fiscal year, we got a bunch of money left in our maintenance budget, got to get rid of it. And so we're just spending whatever we can. So they're painting things that don't need to be painted. You could just bill them if you. I mean, I didn't, but you could just bill them and say, "Okay, you owe me $50,000," and they say, all they want to do is get rid of the money. And that's the kind of thing that, as governor, I listened to some of the other Republican candidates in the forums, and they're talking about getting rid of department heads and replacing those far left wing Democrat department heads with people that are have a more conservative or realistic attitude or philosophy. And I say, no, that's not good enough. What Donald Trump proved, love him or like him, but what he proved is that swamp is that mentality that it permeates the swamp. It's not just the leadership at the top. You can replace all the department heads, the cabinet heads, but the people further down and further down, they're still working for the old administrations, waiting for them to come back. And if you want to change the direction this big ship is moving, you can't just change the top.
Right.
You've got to go down into the bureaucracies and change the philosophy of the people who work there. I mean, I understand this stuff. I've been around in politics since 1980, and I've put 25 measures on the ballot. One measure is a life's accomplishment. I put 25 measures on the ballot, and
what's the measure for the lay public out there?
Yeah, when a ballot measure comes when someone thinks of an idea, they write it and draft it into language that's going to become law if it passes. Be just as much a law as anything else, maybe constitutional in the state of Oregon, and then they collect the signatures. You have to raise the money, collect the signatures. It usually costs a few $100,000 to do one measure. And I've put 25 on the ballot.
25.
More than anybody in the whole country's ever done. I've cut taxes in Oregon by $10 to $15 billion in property taxes alone. The average homeowner, say they've been in their house since 1996, 97, when I passed the Measure 47. Average people have saved like $25,000. $25,000. So, I mean, you multiply that times every middle-class house in the state,
yes,
and you get into the $10 billion, $15 billion in money. And, I mean, everybody could buy a brand-new car and put it in their driveway for the money that I've saved them. I asked for nothing in return. I did it because I thought property taxes, I hate property taxes for one thing. They're not related to a person's ability to pay. Your house goes up 30% in value because of this runaway real estate inflation, but your income only goes up 2%, and yet you got a property tax increase of 30%. I said, no, that's not, we're not doing that anymore. And so I wrote a measure that limited the increase in assessed value to 3%.
Wow.
If your house goes up 10%, your property tax cannot go up more than 3%, unless voters vote to add more stuff on top of them, and sometimes they foolishly do. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. And but that measure alone, 10, $15 billion in savings. Just give you an idea, so people understand the philosophy that I have. I put measures on the ballot that said that the property tax measure, which passed. I put a measure on the ballot: no new taxes or fees without voter approval. So government just can't reach in your pocket and take whatever they want anytime they want. You got to have your approval as voters. I put a measure on the ballot to respect the private property rights. I mean, that's the essence of freedom in a free country. More than free speech is private property rights. If you ask a communist dictator, what's more important to you, to control the property or control speech? I say, I'll take the property. If I can control your property, you're not free anymore. And so I put a measure on the ballot, passed, that said that if government puts a restriction on the use of your property that wasn't there when you bought it, if that restriction reduces the value of your property, they must either remove the restriction or justly compensate you for the loss of value of your property. I'll give you an example. Somebody goes out to the beach and they buy a building lot in a platted subdivision, ocean view, oceanfront, and they paid $300,000 or $400,000 for it. It's just one of the lots in the subdivision, and then the government comes along and says, we're going to make that particular lot kind of a green zone, wildlife set aside, and you can't build there. Well, your $400,000 lot is now worth $20,000, and the government was saying, well, under the U.S. Constitution, they have to pay compensation if they take private property for public use, like going to build a school or a highway through your land. They got to pay you when they take it. They can't just take it. That's protected in the U.S. Constitution. But what the government was saying was, well, if we take your building lot and make it a wildlife set aside for the public use, it's still your lot. We haven't taken it. We've just taken all the use of it, but we haven't taken it. You can still go put a blanket down and have a picnic with your kids and watch the birds, so there's no taking. My measure comes along. I write this measure and say, no, if that restriction reduces the value of your property for the public good, then the public will compensate you for that. Or they can't do it. I have to remove the restriction. Voters approved the measure. It was just a common sense, fair thing, And that was just one measure I put on the ballot. I put on a measure that some people love this, some people hate it. Didn't pass, came close. That required English immersion for immigrant students. So kids come here, we're not going to teach you all the way through high school, from first grade, kindergarten through K through 12. We're not going to teach you in Vietnamese. We're going to teach you English.
Yes.
So you can succeed in our economy and assimilate better. You can keep your culture. We're going to assimilate so we all speak English. And for economic purposes, if you don't speak English, you're very much your earning ability is very much diminished.
Right.
And so I put a measure on the ballot: require English immersion. Right away, we're going to just teach you English. You can keep your native language, you can keep your native culture and all that, but you're going to learn English so you can fit into the economy and succeed. And I got a lot of death threats for this one. I put a measure on the ballot in '94. I wrote the measure that said that reformed the PERS system, public employee retirement system.
Before you get into that, now English as a first language, or English as a second language, was that during that particular discussion? Did you get into that?
No.
The other one?
I didn't try to make English per se the official language.
Okay.
I didn't go there. I believe in that, but I didn't go there because all I was trying to accomplish is to help kids. If you're here, legal or illegally, and you're in our public schools, it costs a lot more money to teach kids in a foreign language. And here's the thing: the teachers union greatly resisted that measure because they got, I think, like 1.5 times the money for kids that don't speak English. So they would take kids that are actually fairly proficient in English, put them in an English as a second language class, because they got more money for that, which retards that child's learning,
Yes.
slows them down, sidetracks them. But they would do them because they got more money. And the thing was, the extra money they got for having that ESL, English as a second language student, was not required to be spent on that program. So they could build a new gymnasium with, they can pave their parking lot, build a playground, but it was a way to get more money. And, you know, some people will never forgive me for what I'm going to say right now, but the teachers union, in my considered opinion, is a curse. No, it's a cancer on public education that's attached itself to public education and now controls it. And when I'm out on the campaign trail, one of the things I tell people is that people think left-wing Democrats control Oregon. They don't. The public employee unions control Oregon. The public employee unions are the ones who fund the left-wing Democrats. And they control, and here's the clearest example. Maybe it's not the clearest because there are so many, but this is a clear example. When the COVID thing comes and the vaccinations are ready, everybody knew by then that the elderly were the most vulnerable.
Right.
But instead of giving the vaccination to the elderly first, the teachers union demanded that school teachers get it first. Kate Brown, because she would not be in office without those guys. Kate Brown gives the teachers union the vaccination ahead of the vulnerable elderly people, and then doesn't even require them to go back into the classroom and teach. Now, if that's not showing who's calling the shots, I don't know what is.
Wow.
Tragic, really. I'm sure there are people that died because of that.
Wow. Very good point. You were getting into PERS when I ended. You were talking about PERS.
Yeah. Well, in '94, I and some others looked ahead and saw that PERS was going to sink the ship.
Okay.
That it's unsustainable to promise public employees that this fund that they have will always get an 8% rate of return on its investments. And then they base their retirement, the actuaries base the retirement benefit of public employees on what they're going to get based on the return, and they're anticipating an 8% return. And which meant, here's
from it, PERS. What is PERS?
Okay.
Again, for the mass.
PERS.
Okay. What is it?
Yeah. Well, PERS is the public employee retirement system for Oregon.
Okay.
And there's one pretty much everywhere in the country.
Okay.
But I looked down the road and I said, so let's say you have, just make up the numbers here, say you have $30 billion in your PERS fund. And that means at an 8% rate of return, you're going to guarantee a $2.4 billion return on that, regardless of what the stock market does or the real estate market, wherever they have the money invested, regardless. So instead, let's say you have a bad turn in the market or different markets, and you lose 10%. Not that everybody that's ever invested knows that happens.
Right.
You know, you lose 10%. What happens? Well, we give them back the 10% they lost, and then we add 8% that we promised them. There's no way that's sustainable long term. And I predicted back then that the PERS fund the day would come when we would be $30 billion in the hole because of things like that 8% guaranteed rate of return. And I think we're in middle 20s, 25, $27 billion. And the market's really high. They've diversified investments enough that it's not totally in the stock market anymore, and which is good. But the vulnerability we have, and they've lowered the rate down from 8 a little bit. My measure passed, but the Oregon Supreme Court, all of whom are on PERS, threw it out. And it was a terrible decision, and it has locked us into a situation where a contractual right was created where none really existed. There was no written contract that said what the Supreme Court said public employees were entitled to. I mean, I believe there's lots of public employees doing very valuable things that are important to our state and our cities and our counties and our schools. So it's not anti-public employee. I'm just saying that however you compensate public employees, it has to be fair to them and fair to the taxpayers who are paying the bills.
That's right.
And we now have a system where PERS is taking so much of the budget that services are cut back and schools are cut back. The amount of people they can afford to have fighting fires or be police officers, all that's been reduced because PERS is taking such a big chunk. In the private sector, you might pay an employer might pay 3 to 4% into a pension fund. Well, it's not unusual in this state for the public employers to be paying like 30%. It's mind-boggling.
30%.
30%. Yeah, because they have to. That's what they have to do to keep PERS afloat in order for it not to be so far in the hole that we're never going to get out. I think it will sink the ship, and I've come up. I'm not going to get into it here because it takes a while to explain.
Okay.
But I've come up with a system that changes the way we pay public employees. Period. And it's fair to them. Actually, a lot of them will like it better than the current system, but it's also fair to the taxpayers, and it helps us to control the costs, and it doesn't violate any constitutional rights or contractual rights that people are guaranteed under the Constitution. But that's another measure. When you think about 25 measures you put on the ballot, there's that's a lot. Teachers Union hated me for this, but I put a measure on the ballot that said that, among other things, it said that if there are layoffs, say the budgets are cut back,
right,
they don't have enough money, they got to lay some people off, that they have to keep the best teachers, not the ones who have been there the longest. The ones who have been there the longest may be the best, but they also may not be.
Yes.
I think I was in an editorial board of a newspaper we all know here in town, and I was sponsoring that measure, and the teachers union was in the editorial board meeting with me, arguing back and forth. And I said, let me give you an example of how this works in real life. Let's say your child is in the first grade. Good little school, and there's two teachers that teach first grade, and one of them is an older person that's been there a long time, and they've never really been a good teacher. They're boring, and all the parents want their child in this other class with this new young teacher that's full of energy, very creative, makes learning fun. The kids love the class, and everybody says, man, I hope our child gets this one instead of that one. Mm-hmm. Then comes a layoff or cutback in staff. Guaranteed by the teachers union, they demand in their contracts that you have to keep the one that's been there the longest, even though everybody knows this is a better teacher and it's better for the kids to have this one. They guarantee that this one stays instead, and that's really the way it works right now in Oregon. And one of the liberals on the editorial board, I won't tell you what newspaper it was, but said, that's exactly what's going on in our school. And everybody wants that teacher, but some of them have to have that one. But if there's layoffs, this good one's going.
Wow.
And the dead wood, if you would. I hate to talk about any teacher that way. There's bad teachers though. There are bad teachers. There's lots of good teachers and there are bad teachers. But the teachers union protects the bad ones at the expense of the good ones. And that's how unions have to have seniority as the guiding factor in almost everything, because the job of a labor union is to win what they can from management, right? And the weaker they can make management, the more control the union has. So they're always trying to neuter management and take away their prerogatives as management to make decisions. And so when they say seniority determines everything, that means management can't say you can stay and you have to go. They can't say that. It has to be determined by this, by something unions have negotiated. And let me give you an example of why I am such an opponent of public employee unions. And if people will think about this, I know it's hard because people instinctively think, well, unions, we have the right to unionize. Not every state not all states even allow public employees to unionize. But here's an example of how it works. Let's say you are in the private sector, and you are on a union negotiating team, and you are negotiating with management, and you gave $10,000 as a union negotiator to somebody on the other side of the table. You would go to prison. And they would go to prison for accepting it, literally, because it totally destroys collective bargaining to have one side bribe the other side. It corrupts it, and so we have laws against it. But here we are in the public sector, and we allow unions, teachers unions, SEIU, AFSCME, all these unions, we allow them to give millions of dollars to people that they are later going to negotiate contracts with that determine their compensation. Millions. I mean, you could not create a better formula for government becoming inefficient and biased towards the union over the taxpayers. The people on the negotiating side for the government, their job is to give taxpayers the best deal they can. The union's job is to get the best they can for their members. Understood. But when you allow this side to give money to that side, you are allowing what is really, I think, inarguably bribery. And it does corrupt the whole system. When Ted Kulingoski, give you an example, when he was elected governor on election night, he stood in front of the cameras and said he owed his victory to his public employee union friends because they had funded so much of his campaign. Then he appointed the teachers union lobbyist to be his chief of staff in the governor's office, and the AFL-CIO president, or whatever he was for the state of Oregon, to be his deputy chief of staff. So basically, they bought that office, and then he let them come in and take over and run it. And there's no way that's to the benefit of taxpayers. And it was a capitulation, a sellout. You know, I mean, I know Ted, and I haven't talked to him for a long time now, but I think he's a decent guy in respect personally, but selling your office to the people who donated money to your campaign, who should not even have been even allowed to donate to somebody they're going to later negotiate contracts with. That's I think that's very sketchy.
You know, just a little point again for my viewing audience here. You're saying, okay, fine, they contribute monies, if you will, on this side of the entities who are responsible, let's say, for an electorate, the government aspect of it. But yet and still, how do they go about doing that? Is it check withdrawal, or do they run fundraising campaigns, or what's the deal on that? Can you tell me about
Well,
that?
it's campaign contributions.
Campaign contributions. How do they go about doing
The public employee unions use the public payroll system to coercively take money out of public employees' paychecks for dues. Then they use a portion of those dues for politics. And I will tell you, I know this from experience. I've felt the wrath of the public employee unions more than anybody in the state ever has. I mean, I'll tell you stories till the cows come home. But they raise the money coercively, and then they use it to buy political power. And that political power means more to them even than what benefits their workers. When I did the PERS measure in '94, PERS measure affected every public employee in the state. And the unions came out and they fought it. I got death threats from that. You know, people were going to threaten to murder my wife and kids in front of me and burn our house down. I mean, people got real serious about that measure, and I ended up passing it. But the money that the public employee unions spent fighting me was really fairly minor compared to what they were capable of spending, and I passed the measure. Close, but I passed it. Then when I put a measure on the ballot that said you cannot use the public payroll system to collect political funds for the union, they came after me with a vengeance that was nothing. What I faced in the PERS measure, which affected their members, was minor compared to when I went after the union's political clout because of money. They cared much more about the union's political clout than they did about their members' pensions. And so what I discovered was that the public payroll system, which should not be used for political purposes, belongs to the taxpayers. It shouldn't be used for anybody's benefit politically. That system is what funds the left-wing radical Democrat Party of the state of Oregon. And if you dare touch that, and I went right at it. I didn't just touch it. I went right at it. I put that measure on the ballot like 3 times. Every time I put it on the ballot, they would just open up the checkbook and spend as much money as they could. This is no exaggeration, Bruce. I had to tell my kids this because the kids watch television, I said, now listen, I'm going to tell you that starting in a week or so, every show you watch, on television, I don't care if it's a sports program, a soap opera, a TV drama at night. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what cable or broadcast television, ABC, NBC, CBS, it doesn't matter if it's that or some obscure. Every show on every channel will have an ad smearing your dad.
Wow. Yeah.
Tens of millions of dollars. And I said, now listen, I just want you to know, when you see those ads, I want you kids to play this little game. So you can be the first one to say, ka-ching, ka-ching, because every time they run one of those ads, it's thousands of dollars that the bad guys, that's why I told my kids, the bad guys are spending. They're attacking dad, but they're just throwing the money away because they're buying the airwaves. They literally bought the airwaves. I mean, any station, any channel, any show, you would find an ad in every one of them, because unions operate on the Saul Alinsky School for Radicals model, which is that you don't fight about the issue. Don't talk about the issue. Personalize it. Teach people to hate the boss, or in this case, hate the guy behind the measure, and demonize them and make it about them. So, and I'll give you an example, and this just shows you how bad it is. At one time, they ran ads that said, don't vote for this measure because Bill Sizemore put it on the ballot. And Bill Sizemore has been convicted of fraud, forgery, and racketeering, which was news to me. I had never been charged with any of those crimes in my life, and at that point, I'd never been charged with anything. And so I sued him. And a Marion County judge said, well, this is going to have to go to trial because I wanted discovery and all that, prove their motives and all that. And the judge said, well, this is going to go to trial. And the teachers union went to the Supreme Court over the judge's head and asked for a very rare, what's called a writ of mandamus, where the court is basically the high court's ordering the lower court to move along or do something differently. And order the judge, you can't do this unless you have an evidentiary hearing and find that legally those statements they made were false. So the judge holds an evidentiary hearing and says, yeah, they are false. Sizemore's never been even charged with these crimes. And convicted is a legal term, and it means that you've been charged with a crime and you've been afforded all of the rights and privileges of a criminal defendant, and been found guilty by a jury of your peers. And none of that's happened. So Bill Sizemore has not been convicted of fraud, forgery, and racketeering. And so he said, we're going to go to trial. They went back to the Supreme Court, and the teachers' unions did, the other unions, and they got another writ of mandamus. And basically, the judge was basically ordered it's okay for the unions to say, because the unions the teachers' unions and these guys are the biggest donors to judges in Oregon, including the Supreme Court. So when the Supreme Court is asked by the teachers' unions and other public employee unions to make this case go away, guess what? It's going to go away. At one time, I owed the teachers' union $4.4 million. That's a lot of money. I didn't have it.
You owed them.
Yeah, they got a judgment against me. The judges in Multnomah County, I mean, we'll talk about a den of thieves there. They give the teachers' unions anything they ask for. And so there was a case in which I was not a party or a defendant, and they got a judgment against my organization. And the unions actually stood up in court and said, at the beginning of the trial, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not about Bill Sizemore. You may like Bill Sizemore, charming. He's not being sued. He's not a defendant. He's not a party to this case. This is not about him. Then they had their trial. No one telling us, including the judge, telling us that the judge in the case, who was hearing this case by the teachers union, that his son is not only a teachers union member of the same union that's suing his dad's court, but he's also an activist who later became a union president. No, he hides that for the whole 3 years he's presiding over this case. So they get this judgment, this phony judgment against me. Then they come to me in the Multnomah County court, in the courthouse, with lawyers from the Department of Justice, which are just political activists with official power. and they come and they say, look, Bill, you owe us 4.4 million. You don't have 4.4 million. We don't want 4.4 million. We just want you to go away. If you'll sign an agreement, stay out of politics for 16 years, we'll forget the money. They tried to bribe me. I turned them down, and eventually I did, by the grace of God, won the appeal, and I don't owe them any money today. I don't owe them a dime. Then they come after me and they say, they stood up in court and said that I had taken $850,000 from this nonprofit that I was running. And the organization only spent about $550 in its entire existence, so this was impossible. But I talked to a legal counsel and an accountant, and they said, I wouldn't file my tax returns until you get that straightened out. Just pay your estimated taxes, don't file them. And they've never prosecuted anybody in Oregon solely for filing their state tax returns late. So just, you'll get it worked out and it'll be fine. And they show up at my door and indicted my wife and I for felony tax evasion. My wife, of course, she's like devastated. My wife's, the definition of an innocent spouse. And we go to court and she's all snot and tears and emotionally, she's embarrassed and, humiliated. And I stand there taking it because I know how these guys play the game and I know what's going on. And so then they come to me and they say, now look, Bill, we're not after your wife. We're after you. What I'm going to tell you right now sounds like something out of a third world banana republic, but it's all true. Bill, we're not after your wife. We know she's an innocent spouse. We're after you. If you will plead guilty to these 3 felonies, we will drop the charges against your wife. But if you don't plead guilty, we're going to charge her with additional crimes. Talk about dirty. This is the Oregon Attorney General's Office, Department of Justice. And put me in a pretty hard place. But I finally said, I'm not going to, I'm not going to capitulate to that manipulation. And I refused. My wife she didn't know what was best for me to do, but she, it was my decision. And I said, I love you, hon, but I don't think it does you any good for you to have a 3-time felon for a husband for the rest of your life. And so, but I feel I'm going to win the case. Well, after a year or so of pretrial motions, they dropped things against my wife, and they gave up on that. They changed the charge from tax evasion to filing late or failure to file. And even the IRS doesn't come after you for filing for about 7 or 8 years. But they came after me. And I'm not worried because I'm going to go to trial and I'm going to explain. I paid $51,000 in estimated taxes. I wasn't trying to evade anything. Here's what they said in court. And by the way, in the meanwhile, I got audited by the Department of Revenue, the senior auditor, and he declared my income for those 3 years in question as about almost $500,000 less than what they had said in court, the $850,000. So it was, I was in good shape.
Right.
Only, right before the trial was to begin, about a week before, here's what the judge rules. Now, you won't believe me. I'm talking about third world banana republic stuff. The judge says, Mr. Sizemore is not going to be allowed to put on a defense. No defense whatsoever. He's not going to be allowed to testify as to why he didn't file his tax returns. He can't have his lawyer or accountant testify as to what they advised him. He cannot tell the jury that he paid $51,000 in estimated taxes. If Mr. Sizemore tries to put on a defense, I will declare a mistrial and hold him in contempt. So I'm going to send you down the hall to the presiding judge of Marion County, the judge says to me. And, these charges could be up to 15 years, but, 2 or 3 years of sentencing guidelines, 2 or 3 years in prison, and the state's offered 30 days. Because what the state wants is for Bill Sizemore to be a felon. Mm-hmm. The state's, the Attorney General's office, they're just like the judges in the Supreme Court in Multnomah County, they're mostly elected with public employee union money. And so, anyway, the end result was they forced me to plead guilty, and it was for filing late, not tax evasion, because they changed the charges. But when they filed the judgment, they kept the tax evasion charge on. as the title to the case, even though that wasn't even the charges anymore. But I'm going to get harassed and mocked and denigrated because of the tax evasion thing. Well, 3 years anyway. To make a longer story short, and it's a much longer story than what I just told you. After 3 years, the judge retroactively changed it back to misdemeanors, which is like a traffic ticket. And when she did it retroactively, I never was a felon. So at one point, I may have been, but legally I never was. If you get that, that's the way it works. And so that's something that I'm fighting. But those things, people say, man, Bill, that's a lot of baggage. And I understand now why you aren't ashamed of that. But I wear it as a badge of honor. This shows you how far the left wing in Oregon has gone to get Bill Sizemore out of politics. Prosecute me, bribe me, sue me, anything to make me go away. And here I am.
You know, as I hear you, I think about, well, what about you, the individual, or we, the public? Where's the checks and balance to counter these kinds of things? Because they are not expertise. We're not expertise. Isn't there something within our form of government that looks out for us?
Well, the system itself is designed so that what happened to me doesn't happen. But the system doesn't always work, because if the people that are also guarding the system to keep us within the guardrails of justice, if they are part of the problem, when you go to the Supreme Court and say, hey, they said I was convicted of fraud, forgery, and racketeering, I'd never even been charged with those crimes, and the Supreme Court says, oh, no, they can say that if they want. The ones who should have been like arbiters of this whole thing,
right,
completely capitulated and failed because they are corrupted by the money that public employee unions give to elect judges. That, the problem with the PERS decisions, the kinds of things that have come out of the Supreme Court in Oregon, is mostly because those people, to me, have been bought and paid for. And I'm very hesitant to undermine the respect people have for government authority, because I believe in law and order and I believe in authority. But there's a point at which if you don't start calling a spade, people don't see that there is a real problem there.
Yeah.
And
sure.
I'm one of the things about being governor is the bully pulpit. And you can stand up and say, all you've ever heard is this side of it. But I'm going to tell you the other side of it now. And every place I can go in the state, every Rotary Club, every Chamber of Commerce, every Lions Club, Elk, Moose, any place, City Club that I can go in and talk, I'm going to go in and I'm going to tell them the side of the story that the left-wing media and the left-wing politicians have not told them.
What do you think about as you're going down this particular trail? Are you getting the opportunity to do so? How's the media treating you?
Well, the media has never treated me fair, and I never expected them to. They're pretty much the reason that, I'll be very blunt.
Yeah.
The reason the far left-wing radicals get away with the things they get away with is because the media covers for them. If the media did not cover for them, they would not do the stuff they do. They couldn't get away with it. And let me give you just a little example. The initiative process in the state of Washington and the state of Oregon, when the Democrats come after the initiative process because allowing the people to vote on measures that they want on the ballot and sign petitions to put on the ballot, that undermines the authority of the legislature and gives more power back to the people. So the politicians don't like it. It's a challenge to their authority. They want to have all the power. And that's the reason they hated me, is because I kept giving Oregonians choices over and over, choices they didn't want them to have. And so people would blame me for what I put on the ballot. I said, wait a minute, all I did was give Oregonians a choice. The fact that they voted for it shows that that's the kind of government they wanted. And the problem is you don't like the people having those choices. Well, in the state of Washington, they went after, the legislature tried to go after the initiative process like they've done in Oregon. Oregon's done a lot to curtail the process and make it very difficult to get things on the ballot. Those were mostly designed to stop me. But, since I've not been doing it for like 12 or 14 years now, they've all those restrictions are still on there. They didn't do that in Washington because the big newspapers in Washington, defended the initiative process and came out to the legislature and said, you're just trying to weaken the ability of the people to have the kind of government they want. And the Democrats backed off. In Oregon, newspapers like, and I use the term loosely when I say newspapers, like the Oregonian, they would cheerlead the legislature in trying to curtail the initiative process. And so they just kept adding more and more restrictions on it to where now it's much more difficult, even dangerous, to put a measure on the ballot. They made it so that you can be, like, if I remember correctly, criminally charged for some of the things your petitioners do that are completely outside your control. And I could talk all day about that subject because when you put 25 measures on the ballot, that's 25 stories, and those stories are.
Well, tell me this:
exciting.
you have another approach, if you will. Let's say once you're elected governor, what approach would you take this time around? I mean, you went through this process, and bang, here we are sitting today. Got me? And you, like I say, you accomplished a number of things there, as far as all of the development measures that you sponsored, and it passed for the people. And then now I'm saying, here you're back at the table. So how are you going to be able to counter this entity now? Let's say you're sitting governor. Talk about that a bit.
Well, first off, I'm hoping that if not immediately, I'm not sure the the red wave, red tide, they're calling it,
right.
is going to sweep Democrats out of power in the legislature in Oregon. That'd be quite a stretch. Could happen, but not likely. It should happen, but not likely. Democrats have been very arrogant and have overreached a lot, so much so that they should be have their chain yanked. But I would be willing to stand in front of the legislature and say, every stupid thing you do that hurts the people of Oregon, I will veto. I don't care if I have to veto 1,000 bills. I will veto everything you do that gets further into the pockets of taxpayers, stops ranchers and farmers from doing having their businesses and running their businesses profitably and successfully. I don't know why liberals are so against ranchers and farmers and loggers. They provide the wood to build your homes and they provide the food to eat, and yet they're always being attacked. But because they do it under the auspices of environmentalism, and they pretend that they are there to protect clean air and clean water. There's nobody that loves clean air and clean water more than outdoor people that work in the outdoors, the ranchers and farmers, etc. Fishermen, hunters. These are people who have great respect for natural resources and for the environment, and yet they are constantly attacking them and undermining their ability to ranch and farm and produce crops. And I'm going to be a friend of the people that are doing those things, and I will veto every bill that the crazies in Portland try to pass in the legislature. Now, it's possible that we'll end up with a conservative legislature again, or Republican legislature. It's possible. If not the first 2 years, maybe the second 2 years of my administration, I will be able to work with Republicans. And what Republicans have never been since I can remember, where they've had a Republican legislature and governorship. There were, under Kitzhaber, there was Republicans in control of the House and Senate. But he stood there for the Democrats and vetoed things that they wanted to veto. But so Republicans have never had control. They've had House and Senate, but not the entire legislature.
Wow. Boy,
How are we doing on time here?
Gee, I don't know. I'd like to have another 2 hours. We've got about 57 seconds. How about
Are you serious? Are you serious?
I'm serious. I'm looking at the numbers right there.
Oh, wow.
Bill, this has been awesome. Wow. You're gonna have to come back.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
We're gonna come back, and I'm sure that the viewing audience is really appreciating this, and you're making a lot of sense, and that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
We got to educate the public, and that's what this is all about.
57 seconds.
Wow,
37
this
now.
is all into something. Awesome.
So my
awesome.
website, friendsofbillsizemore.com.
Okay.
You can go on there. You can request a lawn sign. I'm really looking for places. I have some beautiful big 4x4 signs. People can go on friendsofbillsizemore.com.
Is there a phone number? You got a phone number?
541-892-8050. 541-892-8050.
Okay.
And I appreciate any help people can give. I'm in it to win it, as they say.
Sounds great. Bill, it's going to be a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Nice seeing you, bud.
Yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely.
it. Okay, there you go, folks. Hey, look, have a good one. We'll get Bill back here on again. Okay? Have a good one. Talk to you soon. Take care. God bless.